I thought the party for the movie was at the director's house.
Dick Van Dyke never set out to be a dramatic actor. He wanted to fall downstairs, take a pie to the face, and make a room forget its troubles for 2 hours, and he learned all three from the films and performers he admired as a poor kid in Depression-era Illinois. Buster Keaton, Chaplin, Stan Laurel, Cary Grant, men he studied, imitated, and in some cases tracked down in the phone book just to sit at their feet.
I loved Chaplin, I loved Buster Keaton, and all the great silent film comedians.
So did you try to emulate them even then?
These 6 films show exactly where that admiration came from. 6. Steamboat Bill Jr. Buster Keaton's 1928 comedy follows a soft, college-educated son trying to win the respect of his gruff riverboat captain father, a setup that lets Keaton spend the film's final act inside an actual cyclone, dodging collapsing building facades on a waterfront set that was really being torn apart around him. The most famous shot in it is the 2-ton house front falling directly onto Keaton, who survives only because he happens to be standing exactly where an open window is, a stunt performed with no trick photography and inches of margin for error. Dick Van Dyke has said plainly that as a boy he loved all the silent comedians. Buster Keaton
was a great example of that period.
Yeah.
He thought we really caught it. But
Laurel and Hardy, Chaplin, and that he'd come home from a Keaton picture and try out everything he'd just seen. That's not a passive description of childhood entertainment. It's a description of a training method, a kid teaching himself physical comedy in real time by copying a master, frame by frame. Keaton's refusal to fake a fall or cut away from a collapse gave young Van Dyke his first real education in the idea that comedy could be as rigorous a discipline as any dramatic craft. What made Keaton different from his contemporaries was the absence of visible fear in the performance. Where a lesser physical comedian might have let the audience see the calculation behind a stunt, Keaton played every collision as though it were simply happening to him, an accident of fate rather than an engineered feat. That deadpan commitment was itself a kind of lesson, one that a boy watching in a darkened Illinois theater could absorb without anyone having to explain it. The stillness of Keaton's face in the middle of genuine physical danger became, decades later, recognizable in Van Dyke's own instinct to underplay a fall rather than sell it, to let the body do the joke while the expression stayed almost calm. Decades later, once he was already famous, Van Dyke tracked Keaton down the same unglamorous way he'd once found Stan Laurel by looking through the phone book, and showed up at his house in the San Fernando Valley simply to sit with him.
Became famous, you looked him up in the phone book. He was in the phone book, isn't that true? In
he
Santa
was by
Monica?
accident. I was looking up something else.
That instinct to seek out the source instead of admiring it from a distance tells you how seriously he took the debt. Every pratfall Van Dyke ever executed on television or a Disney soundstage carries a little of Keaton's stone-faced precision underneath the mugging. 5. City Lights. Chaplin's 1931 film follows the tramp falling in love with a blind flower girl who mistakes him, through a chain of accidents, for a wealthy man, and the story balances the whole way through on the fact that she can never learn the truth without the romance collapsing. It's built almost entirely from sight gags and pantomime, a boxing match played for slapstick, a swallowed whistle causing chaos at a party. All of it circling toward an ending that trades the laughter for something quieter. The girl regaining her sight, seeing the real tramp for the first time, and the film closing on his face as he waits to find out if she'll still want him. Chaplin belonged to the same trio of names Van Dyke reached for.
I thought this character could have enough of eccentricity in his personality that he would still be kind of interesting to watch.
Whenever he talked about his childhood heroes, and City Lights represents the fullest version of what a young physical comedian would have absorbed instinctively from him. The tramp's dignity surviving intact through every collision with a world that refuses to make room for him. Chaplin proved pathos and slapstick weren't opposing forces, but two ends of the same instrument, and that the biggest laugh in a scene could sit one beat away from its saddest. What separated Chaplin from the other silent clowns a young Van Dyke studied was the sheer control of tempo, the way a scene could slow almost to stillness right before the gag landed, forcing the audience to lean in rather than simply react. That patience is a harder thing to imitate than a stunt, because it depends on trusting silence rather than filling it, and it shows up in Van Dyke's own best physical comedy. The beats he holds a half-second longer than expected before the pratfall actually happens. It's the difference between a performer who wants a laugh and one who wants to be believed first. Van Dyke carried that instinct into the darker corners of his own filmography, most directly in the comic. A 1969 film Carl Reiner built specifically around him about a self-destructive silent-era clown, loosely modeled on men like Keaton and Laurel. Van Dyke playing a man whose comic gift curdled into something tragic was in its own way a tribute to Chaplin's central discovery that the funniest men on screen were usually standing an inch from heartbreak. 4. Bratz and the Laurel and Hardy shorts. Bratz from 1930 runs on a single absurd trick. Laurel and Hardy play both the fathers babysitting for the night and their own small sons, using oversized furniture and forced perspective to sell two versions of the same actors sharing a house. The joke never breaks its own logic. Doors, staircases, and bathtubs are all doubled in scale, and the children behave with the same wounded dignity and dim confusion as their adult selves, which is the whole point. The comedy comes from character, not chaos. Hardy's patient exasperation and Laurel's blank incomprehension would be funny in any setting, and the film exists mainly to prove it. No relationship shaped Van Dyke's sense of comedy more than his friendship with Stan Laurel, and it began, fittingly, with Van Dyke performing a Laurel and Hardy tribute sketch on his own sitcom before he'd ever met the man. When Laurel called afterward to say he'd seen the episode, Van Dyke spent years visiting him on Sundays at his apartment.
Certainly, if you must make a noise, make it quietly.
Absorbing whatever the old comedian would share about the mechanics of a well-built joke. When Laurel died in 1965, Van Dyke delivered the eulogy, and Laurel left him his famous bow tie. The friendship gave Van Dyke something no film study alone could have: direct access to a working comedian's doubts. Laurel was, by Van Dyke's account, still writing new sketches for himself and Hardy years after Hardy had died, filing them away in shoeboxes with no audience left to perform them for. That image, a master of the form still compulsively building jokes with nowhere to send them, must have told Van Dyke something about the difference between chasing an audience and simply being unable to stop making things. It is a version of dedication that has nothing to do with fame and everything to do with need. That closeness makes the shorts themselves the mismatched rhythm of Laurel's confusion against Hardy's wounded dignity impossible to separate from the man who kept them alive for him. Van Dyke once asked Laurel directly what made a comedian funny, and Laurel told him he didn't fully know either. That honest shrug from a master of the form may be the truest lesson Van Dyke ever received about comedy, that it couldn't be reverse-engineered, only practiced with total sincerity. 3. A Christmas Carol. The Alastair Sim version, released in 1951, follows Ebenezer Scrooge across a single night as three ghosts drag him backward through his own life and forward into a future he hasn't earned, a bitter old miser forced to watch, powerless, as the people he wronged grieve, celebrate, and carry on without any softening on his account. Sim plays the transformation at the end almost as slapstick.
Hatchet, you're late.
Sir, what do you mean by coming in here this time of day?
A giddy, disbelieving old man laughing and stumbling through his own house on Christmas morning, which is what makes the redemption land. The joy looks physically uncontainable after so much cold restraint. Van Dyke has said outright, well into his 90s, that Scrooge is the role he always wanted and never got the chance to play. That's a strange thing for an actor built almost entirely out of warmth and physical joy to want Scrooge as coldness itself, a man who has to be broken down before he can be redeemed. But the desire makes sense once you see it as the flip side of everything Van Dyke absorbed from Chaplin and Keaton, that the most affecting comic performances usually have grief sitting just beneath them, and redemption plays best against the darkest possible backdrop. There's also something practical in the appeal. Scrooge is one of the rare roles built entirely around a single character's transformation rather than an ensemble's chemistry. And for a performer who spent most of his career sharing the frame with Mary Tyler Moore, with Julie Andrews, with an entire troupe of dancing chimney, sweeps the idea of carrying an audience alone through fear into joy would have been its own kind of challenge. A test of whether the warmth people loved him for could survive being switched off and slowly relit on camera. The Sim film is built on exactly that structure, a comic, almost vaudevillian energy in its ghosts and transformations, wrapped around a story about a man who has forgotten how to feel anything at all. Van Dyke wanting that role at 99 is a performer still chasing the one shape of story his own career had circled, without ever quite landing on directly. 2. An Affair to Remember. Grant's 1957 romance follows two engaged to other people strangers who fall for each other on a transatlantic crossing and agree to meet again in 6 months atop the Empire State Building, only for an accident to keep one of them from making it up the stairs. Grant plays the entire first half as a practiced charmer visibly caught off guard by his own sincerity, and the film's power comes from watching that polish crack. In real time, the jokes never stop, but they start covering for something instead of deflecting it. Van Dyke has called turning down a film with Cary Grant one of his deepest professional regrets, a rare admission from a man who has spent most interviews sounding entirely at peace with the choices he's made. Grant represented something Van Dyke's own persona never fully claimed: effortless, tailored elegance layered over the same precise comic timing Van Dyke had built his career on. Where Van Dyke's comedy came from falling down, Grant's came from never quite losing his balance, no matter how absurd the situation got around him. Part of what makes the regret sting is timing. By the point Van Dyke was established enough in Hollywood to plausibly share a picture with Grant, Grant himself was nearing the end of his own leading man years, which meant the window to stand opposite him at the height of both their powers had already mostly closed. Regret, for Van Dyke, rarely attaches to failure. His career is famously full of choices he defends without hesitation, which makes this one exception carry more weight than a longer list of grievances ever could. That admiration explains something about the physical control underneath Van Dyke's own work, the way his pratfalls, for all their looseness, were always exactly choreographed. He wanted the polish as much as the chaos. Missing the chance to stand across from Grant and test that instinct directly is a regret he has never stopped naming. 1. Mary Poppins. Disney's 1964 musical follows a magical nanny who arrives at a repressed London household to fix not the children, but the emotionally absent father, using flying umbrellas, chalk-drawn worlds you can jump into, and a chimney sweep named Bert as her chief accomplice in reminding everyone how to feel joy again. Van Dyke's Bert narrates the film almost like a vaudeville host, breaking into dance on rooftops with an entire troupe of soot-covered sweeps, holding the whole fantasy together with nothing but grinning momentum.
We'll move the job along.
Every thread comes back to this one. Van Dyke has said Mary Poppins is the work he's most proud of, above his sitcom, above everything. And the affection shows in the details he still remembers, decades later the day the crew filming I Love to Laugh got left hanging from the rigging for 15 minutes because everyone forgot they were up there for lunch. He tells that story with the same delight a kid has recounting a prank that worked. There's a symmetry worth sitting with here. A boy who once sat in a darkened Illinois theater trying to memorize exactly how Keaton fell, how Chaplin timed a pause, how Laurel let confusion sit on his face a beat too long, grew up to stand on a soundstage rooftop built specifically so he could hand that same wide-eyed wonder to another generation of kids in the dark. Bert isn't just a character Van Dyke performed. He's the closest thing his career produced to a direct transmission of everything those earlier films taught him, repackaged for an audience who would never know the silent originals existed. Bert is Keaton's physical control, Chaplin's warmth, Laurel's daffy sweetness, and Cary Grant's effortlessness, all fused into one performance built for a Disney soundstage. It's the film where every comedian he studied and every phone book friendship he chased finally had somewhere to go. Van Dyke spent a childhood in the dark learning from other men's films. Mary Poppins is the one where he finally got to be the movie someone else's kid would grow up loving. Keaton taught him precision. Chaplin taught him heartbreak. Laurel taught him honesty. Cary Grant taught him elegance. 6 films, 1 lifetime spent chasing the wide-eyed love of movies he never grew out of. Subscribe and tell us your favorite Van Dyke performance below.